Damien, hi, and thanks for sitting down with us and chatting. Why don't you take a moment and introduce yourself to those who don't know you?
Thanks, Amanda. My name is Damien Berg. I'm the Vice President of Strategic Initiatives for HSPA, or Healthcare Sterile Processing Association. I'm a member of several AAMI working groups, and I also have the privilege and honor to serve as a U.S. expert for the ISO committee, ISO Working Group Number 7 Packaging.
Okay, great. So, of course, you're aware ISO TC 198 is meeting here this week. You're part of one of the working groups that's meeting, and then we have a plenary at the end of the week. And we're thrilled to have you here. One of the things that we try to do is have a balance of interest categories in participation in the AAMI standards work. And it's all different countries that participate in the ISO work, of course. And it's not always as balanced as we strive for on the AAMI side, so it's great to have the clinical perspective represented, which you bring.
Yes, it's an amazing thing. So I've been serving with the AAMI committees for many years, and just I want to say probably 2017, 2018, I got involved in the ISO committees on the international level, and now it's expanding more, obviously, with my role with HSPA. But it's an amazing opportunity to represent not only the user side, on the U.S. side, but also on the international side, and represent HSPA and what our members do and bring that to the table when we're talking about international standards. And the dealing with the international teams is amazing because we've got the Germans, we've got the Japanese, we've got Luxembourg, we've got Canada, we've got you name it. We've got the countries around the world that are participating live and also virtually, and we get to listen to their point of views and what their manufacturers, but what their end users are doing for reprocessing of medical devices as well as patient safety. And sometimes it aligns perfectly with what HSPA does and the United States does. And sometimes there's some very unique differences, and it's fun to reconcile those.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great blend of perspectives, and it's good not just to have folks from around the world chiming in, but also to have, you hear the industry perspective, you have the clinical perspective, and we try to get to something that's reasonably practicable, as they say.
Yes, that's true, because at the end of the day, we're here to represent the U.S. as the U.S. experts. But you also have to realize that there is something practical for all the countries and for what ISO is trying to bring forward for. And some of it is already out there. And then maybe as we're developing our national standards, we look at these ISO documents. This is something we can pull from, and vice versa. Hopefully we can contribute, and then other countries can pull from the great work that we're doing here.
Yeah, that's a really good point. A lot of times that is how an international standard gets started. It's a national group will have a document that exists, and they'll serve it up to the ISO side as a good foundation for a gap that is existing around the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a fun mental challenge, I guess, is a good way to put it, because sometimes I'm wearing my U.S. expert hat, but also as a person who lives and breathes sterile processing in the U.S., sometimes I've got to realize that it's not all about the U.S. I've got to listen to the other perspectives and learn, and sometimes it applies and sometimes it doesn't apply. And that's the fun balance and checks that we got to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell me a little bit about how your work on the standards development side translates back to the clinical side here. I know you're engaged not just with HSPA, but you're still involved in the hospitals directly.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I have one of the unique roles. So when I took this job with HSPA a year and a half ago now, I didn't give up my job as a sterile processing technician in the field in the front line. So my previous, where I was the manager of sterile processing for University of Colorado in Northern Colorado, I had 3 facilities that I oversaw. When I gave that up to work full-time for HSPA, I stayed on as a per diem sterile processing technician and consultant, or as I call, phone a friend. But every month I go in there and I do a couple hours in my old departments as a technician. So I still work the front line right next to my former staff. So as I'm doing standards, as I'm representing HSPA, as I'm working on ISO levels, whether it's AAMI, ISO, HSPA, I'm still at the front line talking and listening and seeing the frontline technicians on a monthly basis on what they're going through. So how our standards, how our work that we're doing here, how it can impact them. And so I actually can bring back the real world perspective as well as bring the real world perspective to the standards. And I think that's a very unique crossover.
Absolutely, and so important as well. So when you started as a U.S. expert, you were solely based in the hospitals. You were directly involved in clinical work, and you've been able to stay as a U.S. expert after you transitioned to your role at HSPA, sorry about that. And, it's wonderful that HSPA supports that work, sees the importance of engaging in standards development, and particularly at the international level.
Very true. One thing, I'll kind of back on the history here. When HSPA came around, which is a year now, actually it'll be year January 1st when we did our name change away from Isham.
And I didn't say Isham, at least.
So from Isham to HSPA, we lost the I. So we lost the international in our name. And a lot of people, especially our international partners around the world, were like, oh, you're not international anymore. No, international is still in our mission. It is still what we do. And now as my role as vice president is to ensure that we stay international as part of what our representation and keep a strong focus on our international members and content. So being a U.S. expert from HSPA representing the U.S. on the ISO side, I think is one of those steps that we do, amongst many that HSPA does, but this is a key one right here.
Absolutely. So one of the things that is so great about this week is we are back to meeting in person. We have had a 3-year hiatus. It's just the way the meeting shook out for ISO TC 198. We last met in 2019, actually almost 3 years ago to the day in Seoul, South Korea. And the groups have been working in the interim virtually. But we're back together in person after ISO has lifted the prohibition on meetings in person due to the pandemic that's been going on. There is so much value to being back in person, being able to talk to your standards colleagues and be able to read the room. Is it a different feel for you being here?
Well, two things. One, you're absolutely right. Being live, there's no supplement for it. There's no replacement for it. But also, because of the pandemic, we also know there's members that even before when we were all live, now we're used to virtual. So some people can call in and be participants virtually that wouldn't be able to show up here previously prior to the pandemic. However, being able to read the audience, talk to them, have conversations, before meetings, after meetings, during meetings, not work conversations, not about the standards. We save that for the room. But just to get to know them and bring that human touch is invaluable. And I'm seeing that more and more as I travel, ending my travel for the year almost at a record pace that I've never done before, internationally and nationally. But to end my last travel of the year at an international standards meeting on our home turf, but being able to meet. I've introduced to someone from India today that I never met before, and he was very excited to talk to me. I met someone from Luxembourg today that I never met before live in person, and I met someone from Sweden today, or this week, that I never got to talk before. So you get to meet and do these contacts of people around the globe that, yes, we're going to work together really intense for while we're here, but now I've expanded that relationship beyond the end of the meeting online. It's now it's much more than that now.
Right, absolutely, and there is a tremendous benefit to, as you say, working those breaks, those networking breaks, the coffee breaks, and getting to know the people that you're working with in standards development and understand them on a more personal level. And it does just seem to really facilitate getting to consensus and understanding the different perspectives that are involved in the work.
It does help, and I've worked on international stage. Both before HSPA and currently in HSPA, definitely more now so on HSPA, that it is important because communication barriers and language barriers exists. But the human barrier, the face-to-face, the contact and the interpersonal connections can help overcome some of those things that if you're on a phone or if you're on a Zoom, it's tough to overcome those. So being able to have those stuff. I mean, I can't tell you, being someone who's traveled the globe but not been in some of these countries, it's nice to have a conversation with them again outside the room to talk about where they come from, what they do, what's their hospital like, what's their manufacturing process like. And they ask me the same things. They're very curious what we do here in the U.S., and I'm very curious what they do. That builds that bond. So when we do get into, I don't want to say sticky or difficult conversations, but conversations that require a little more thought and concentration, we have that bond now.
Right, you understand the practice that's underpinning the perspective.
And we, it's the human contact, the human nature of it. And so that also helps go through it. And we can have some levity. I mean, surprised to say, in some of these meetings, we can have a little levity and make fun of each other on that. So I will save that for the live in-person stuff.
Yeah. Well, it's been a good week, very productive week, really excited. Happy that you're here. Anything else that you want to share before we wrap up?
No, I think the last thing I want to share is I do appreciate Amy for hosting the ISO meeting here. Again, this is home territory for us. I mean, I'm used to coming here, but having Amy be able to host the ISO meeting, I think the last ISO meeting I attended was in London in 2018, I believe. But it is nice to be here, even though I love to travel. But we couldn't do it without Amy. We couldn't do it without Amy staff and Amy support and all the technology, all the stuff that goes into running a meeting. So HSPA, on behalf of HSPA, we're proud to be here. We're proud to represent. And thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you. We're thrilled to have the committee here this week. As you know, Amy runs the secretariat for ISO TC 198, so it's great to kind of bring everybody home, so to speak, for this first return to in-person meetings. So, Damien, thank you again.
Thank you, Amanda. Appreciate being here.